Welcome. You're listening to Latin Waves with your hosts, Sylvia and Stuart Richardson. Latin Waves is more than just hot rhythms. This is a show about community, about creating a culture that is inclusive and based on fairness. Because everyone deserves dignity, respect, and has something to contribute. A new world is possible, and it all starts with us.
You're listening to Latin Waves. My name is Stuart Richardson. I'm very privileged to have Bruce Gagnon on the line today. He's a co-founder and coordinator of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, a lifelong union and peace activist, and also writes for a blog called Organizing Those. Hey, welcome back to the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Stuart. Good to be with you again.
I'll just give a little brief history. When they reunified Germany, Russia was promised that NATO would not expand eastward. Now they're in almost every nation that borders Russia, and they were talking of Ukraine joining NATO. So that promise was broken. But I wonder if you could give us a brief history since 2014, some of the origins of this conflict, because what we're getting on TV and the mainstream media is kind of almost cartoonish, evil versus good kind of narrative that we heard in Iraq. So can you take us back to 2014 and just kind of lay out how this conflict evolved?
If I could, I'd like to go back to 2008 first to a speech that Vladimir Putin made at the Munich Security Conference. Leaders from all over the world there. Sitting in the front row was John McCain, Joe Lieberman, and Secretary of Defense then Bill Gates. And Putin made an appeal saying that, you broke the promise that NATO wouldn't expand towards us, and now this was broken during the Bill Clinton administration. He called it NATO enlargement. So now NATO is on all of our borders. You're having regular war games right up against our country. And this is a problem. And you've backed out of all the anti-nuclear weapons treaties, the arms control treaties. You backed out of those. And you're pumping up your military to massive levels. This year, Russia, by the way, is spending $65 billion on its military. It's a defensive military. Protect your borders. United States, when you add up all the various pots of gold, the nuclear weapons spending by the U.S. is hidden in the Department of Energy budget. When you add it all up, it's over $1.2 trillion. You add the NATO allies' money in there, it's 60% or more of the global total. So Putin in 2008 says this to the leaders of the world. This is a problem. We need a security arrangement, treaties, negotiations in writing, because we're heading towards danger zone. Well, they got really mad at Putin for making that speech in 2008, which I found to be very realistic and sensible. And they've been after him ever since, demonizing him every way possible because they saw that they couldn't control Russia. And they want Russia to be broken up, to be balkanized because of its massive resource base, because of climate change and the melting of the ice in the Arctic. Drill, baby, drill in that region. The Western fossil fuel corporations want it bad. And so since 2008 up to 2014, they've been working Russia over left and right with punches to the gut and to the face. And then in 2014, the United States organizes a coup d'etat in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. The elected government that was trying to have relationships with both Russia and Europe at the same time. He was thrown out of power by the armed muscle of the Nazis, who were used by the U.S. To push through this coup d'etat in Kiev. This was during the Obama administration. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Vice President Joe Biden, Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, they were all involved in this coup. First thing the new government did was to declare the speaking of Russian illegal in Ukraine. Well, this is insane because 1/3 of the country speaks predominantly Russian. The this part of the country, part of Ukraine that's closest to the Russian border. It's called the Donbass region. That's the part that just voted in the referendum to rejoin Russia. And since they started this effort in 2014, the people to say, we want to speak our local language, we want local autonomy, we want a federated government. They didn't say we wanted to leave Ukraine. They said we want a federated government. And so what did they do in Kiev with the U.S. backing? They sent the Nazis to the eastern Ukraine to attack their own fellow citizens, Ukrainian, Russian ethnic citizens. And up to this point, they've killed about 15,000 and injured more than 35,000 since 2014. U.S. set up military bases in the western Ukraine near Poland. That's where the Nazis predominate in the country. And sent in Special Forces troops from Fort Carson, Colorado, to train them. I know this because one of my best friends, his son is in Special Forces, Fort Carson, Colorado, and he was twice sent to this base in Ukraine to train the Nazis, who were then sent eastward, funded by the U.S. and NATO war machine, to attack the Russian ethnic people, trying to draw Russia into a war that would destabilize it, kick in more sanctions, and allow the West to break Russia up in its own coup d'etat, break it up into smaller countries. That's been the agenda all along.
Since 2014, there's been so many atrocities, but I guess our mainstream media just missed that, or NATO didn't seem to have any outrage when it was ethnic Russians being killed in the East. The cost of this war is tremendous. For your American listeners, think about this. $2.40 a liter for gasoline today at the pump. Times 4 because you pay by the gallon, so that's over $8 a gallon we're paying in Canada. The people of Europe are going to have a very rough winter. People of the world are going to pay the price, but our leaders don't seem to even want to move to peace. They don't even seem to, it's not even on the table. They just want to prolong this. So can you talk to the human cost around the world and in Europe, United States, because our leaders are so determined to continue this war?
Well, the sanctions are already taking the European people out. It's like taking a baseball bat to their knees. And it's going to get worse. Winter hasn't really started there yet. So once it does, they're in big trouble. But I read the other day that toilet paper companies in Germany were closing down because they couldn't afford the energy to produce their product. And so now they're buying American toilet paper. And this is going to be repeated over and over and over again. The entire European Union is going to collapse. And NATO is going to collapse too, ultimately, because it's instigated this monster that they've now unleashed on the world. And it's all about the West, the Europeans, United States, who have been the colonial masters, controlling Africa, India, the Middle East, Latin America, Asia, the world, literally, for hundreds of years, including China, right? With the Opium Wars. So, I mean, all of this is laid out in a Rand Corporation study from 2019. I'm looking at it online right now. And it's called Overextending and Unbalancing Russia. And in this study, the Rand Corporation, by the way, is the one that did the famous Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War, the secret government history about how they lied to the American people, lied to the Congress, lied to the media in order to create the war in Vietnam, the pretext, the rationalization, all that stuff. That was the Rand Corporation. It's funded by the U.S. military. It's a think tank. And the Rand Corporation has come out with a study basically saying that if we create vulnerability in Russia, overextend them, unbalance them, we'll be able to force a coup d'etat, and we'll be able to break it up into smaller countries. And they say that we can use Ukraine as a hammer, as a tool to force this situation. So the United States really doesn't give a damn about the people of Ukraine. That's one of the great most saddest things of this whole current situation. The United States is using them as a tool to go after Russia. And that's really despicable. As far as I'm concerned, it's the epitome of evil.
I heard a great quote, and it says, people think the United States is helping Ukraine fight Russia. No, the U.S. is using Ukraine to fight Russia. And it is completely despicable. We just want peace. We don't want any Russians to die there. We don't want any more innocent Ukrainians to die. And I am just shocked, Bruce, at how chill everybody is about nuclear war. It's being threatened by the U.S. It's been the two largest nuclear powers in the world are threatening nuclear weapons, just like willy-nilly. And nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to want to push that to the negotiating table. And recently in the news, we had this Nord Stream pipeline that blew up, and everyone says Russia blew up its own pipeline, which is kind of ludicrous because they could just turn off the pipeline. So deliberately sabotaging pipelines to punish the citizens of Europe and and to punish Russia, like where's this going? What's the end game? And why aren't people getting upset about this? What the hell is going on? Where's the anti-war movement?
You remind me of the comedian George Carlin, who used those very same words, talking about the corporate takeover of America and how we are becoming slaves to the corporations. And he says, nobody knows, nobody seems to care. That's exactly what you just said. And you're right. And I think what it is the American people are soulless today, or people from the West, the people from Canada, the people from, Europe. Of course, there are exceptions, but generally, the majority of people have become soulless because they've been brainwashed and they've become addicted to corporate media. They sit there and watch it just like a vegetable, and they suck in everything, and they repeat it. They then, because it's repeated to them so many times that they literally memorize it. Putin is evil. Putin's a dictator. Putin's blah blah blah. People don't know anything about Vladimir Putin. They don't know anything about him. They've never watched a speech he's made. They've never read a speech that he's made. They don't know anything. They don't know anything about Russian history. They don't know anything about what's really going on. They don't know anything about NATO. I stand on a street corner twice a week since February, every week here in my town of Brunswick, Maine, where I live. And I stand there with a sign that says, "No war with Russia, stop NATO." People don't know what NATO is. What little they've heard about it, NATO is defense, it's protecting us from those evil bad guys in Russia. That's all they know. And so the problem is the American people and the Canadians and people throughout the West are basically, they've lost their soul. They've lost their sense of solidarity, their belief in sovereign nations. Sovereign nations means the people run the nation, not the corporations. And what the United States is, it's been taken over by corporate power. Mussolini, during World War II, the fascist dictator, said that fascism was defined as the wedding of corporations and government. Well, that's what we have today in the United States and through most of the West, most of the EU, right. The neocons. They've taken control of all these governments. Don't give a damn about the people.
I'll say this. I believe people are generally good, and I think people with all the Ukrainian stickers and flags generally want to support Ukrainians in a time of war. And what they're taught and what they're told is just nonsense. So they don't really understand the conflict. There's a video circulating on YouTube where a Labour Party leader from the UK was speaking at their convention. And he says, we say we want to support Ukraine, but when we say we want to support Ukraine, you're supporting a country that just banned political opponent parties or socialist parties. You're talking about an anti-union neoliberal government. You're talking about supporting U.S. hegemony. If we want to support the people of Ukraine, we don't put a bloody sticker on the car. We want peace. The people who are these armchair quarterbacks, never been in a war, they've never seen in a conflict, they've never talked to anyone who's been in a war, is absolute hell. I will give people the credit that they're kind of sheltered. They're in a bubble in the West, and they haven't experienced the hardships. And one commentator, Bruce, says, if you've lived in countries for years in Latin America and parts of Asia that have had sanctions, people are kind of tougher Europeans and North Americans. So can you speak to a little bit about what you feel that maybe things need to get a little harder, maybe things need to get a little tougher on people before they start to wake up, or what could be the solution here?
You listen to Latin Waves. To support our work, please visit latinwavesmedia.com and consider becoming a member for as little as $1 per month. Thank you for listening.
By then, it's going to be too late. By then, we're going to return to feudalism because they're going to crash the economies around the world. I think this is all planned, to be honest with you, because they're doing too many things that don't make any sense unless they were actually planning it. So I call this corporate neocon monolith Mr. Big. Mr. Big wants to take us all down back to feudalism. They want to control the entire planet, the resources, the dwindling resources on the planet. They want to make us pay for water to drink. I mean, you're going to have to pay to survive. And where are you going to get the money? Where are you going to get the job? So they're going to thin the population. That's the plan. There's a good reason why people are scared and they're nervous. And they're afraid to speak out because they're afraid of being identified. But what's going to happen is we can't wait, because if we wait, then it's going to be too late. And then people are going to say, why didn't somebody do something? Why didn't somebody say something? Why didn't somebody tell me about this? Well, we're telling you now. And the time has come to speak out, because if you love your children, and I'm sure you do, and your grandchildren, and I'm sure you do, it's time to protect them. Stop being so self-centered. Stop worrying about what the social circle at dinner party is going to think of you if you speak out and tell the truth.
For sure, and there's so much censorship and nonsense going on. But there's protests in Europe. They're not in Czechoslovakia. We're starting to see protests that people want peace. Governments are changing. They just got a new government in Italy that's against the UN and the World Economic Forum. So things are changing. And here's my pet peeve, Bruce. Like, the faith, people in the faith community, isn't it thou shalt not kill? It's not thou shalt not kill unless state sponsored. Where the hell are the churches in the faith community? I want to put a call out, latinwaves@gmail.com. If you're in the faith community, if your church has been speaking about peace, let me know. And I'll promote them. I'll talk about it. I'll try to push traffic to it and give you kudos, because we need more people to come together. We need better ideas. We need a peace movement. And we need, Tulsi Gabbard, the former presidential candidate, said, the first rule of war is unpredictable. We are on the edge of something catastrophic, and these leaders are playing games with our lives. So can you talk a little bit about the shifting political waves that we're starting to see around the world, and of course they're not being publicized?
Yeah, in the Czech Republic, in Prague, just twice, 2 days ago and then previously a couple of weeks ago, they pulled out more than 70,000 people in the center square to protest their government's support for Ukraine. They say stop sending Ukraine weapons. They're angry about NATO. They say get out of NATO because it's bleeding us. And then they say stop the sanctions on Russia and allow us to import natural gas from Russia. Otherwise, we're going to freeze to death. The people know the answers to these questions, and the people in some places are mobilizing. Germany, I look every day on YouTube, and I look at videos of protests all over Germany, small town, big cities, and it's happening not just weekends. It's happening every day and at nighttime too. So I watch these short videos, and they're saying the same thing as the people in the Czech Republic. But then, and in fact, in Germany, in their protest marches, they've been calling for turning on Nord Stream 2. Turn it on. Let the gas flow from Russia, the undersea pipeline. And then it gets blown up. It gets blown up. Well, who did that? Oh, Russia must have done that because Russia's evil. Russia's bad. Oh, why would Russia blow up their own pipeline that they just spent billions and billions of dollars to build undersea to Germany to move natural gas from Russia to Germany. Why would Russia
sense.
blow it up when all they have to do is turn off the spigot if they wanted to? Why would they do that? And who would benefit if it was blown up? The States.
The leaders are just shutting down the global economy. People are going to be really hurting, Bruce. And I agree with fighting. I agree with fighting poverty. I agree with fighting climate change. People of the United States, think about this. Florida's in ruins. How many taxpayers in Florida have sent weapons to Ukraine and now will receive minimal government support in rebuilding your lives?
Yeah.
How many people in Canada on our East Coast, they promised $10 million for a destructive force, remnants of a hurricane that destroyed our East Coast. People have lost everything. We'll give you $10 million. That's a spit in the bucket. How much money for human needs with people sleeping on the streets? We have these catastrophes of climate change. They don't give two shits. They're going to keep funding war unless the people in these countries wake up. Inflation is crushing us. They raised, I'm paying an extra $3,000 a year in interest to the bank. They're giving the money back to the bank because they keep raising our interest rates. And here we are. Look around at the human needs. Talk about what could be done in the United States, Bruce, if we just redirected some of that money.
Oh, my God. We could do so many things. And but you're right. They don't want to do it. And who doesn't want to do it? The oligarchs. And who are the oligarchs? Well, they're the corporations. They're the rich elite, the top 1%. And they run the show. And they control the politicians. And this whole game that everybody has fallen into, this trap, oh, my God, are the Democrats going to hang on to Congress, and, are the Republicans going to take control in November? It's all a sideshow. They play good cop, bad cop. Both parties work for the big money, for Mr. Big, for the corporate take. Every single Democrat voted for the now it's up to, I don't know, 50 billion, 60 billion. Every day I read another 10, 12 billions going to Ukraine from the United States for war against Russia, And today it was announced that the United States is opening up a new military operation in Wiesbaden, Germany, and it's going to be directly in control of the war operation. So there's no thought anymore that, hey, this war is Ukraine against Russia, and the United States is just helping Ukraine because we're good guys and we always defend freedom and democracy. No, the United States is running this war. Last June 25th, the New York Times surprisingly ran a story saying that the CIA was the ones directing the strikes from using U.S. military satellite technology to give the coordinates of Russian troops and civilian locations, and they give it to the Ukrainians. They then fire these U.S. NATO donated missiles, long-range missiles that then hit. In the case of Donetsk, just before this referendum, the Ukrainian army was pulverizing cities in that region, bombing hospitals, hotels, schools, daycare centers, senior citizen centers, farmers markets where people are buying produce, stuff like that. And they killed just more and more and more and more people just in the last 2 weeks. That's all with our money, with all our support. It's insane. It's sick. And again, I say it's evil.
For sure, and our governments are also picking fights with China. They're sailing military boats through the South China Sea. The U.S. can't send enough diplomats to Taiwan. It's like they're picking fights with China and North Korea, and it's like a drunk driver. Would you let someone drive the bus drunk, or would you, as the passengers, all get up and take him out from behind the wheel? So one way to get behind the wheel and stop this craziness is to get information and get organized. And that's when I think of you and all the work you're doing. So can you give us a little, some information, or how can people get good information about what's really going on?
Yeah, let me suggest some various websites. First, I want to suggest my blog. It's called Organizing Notes. Every day I'm posting things on there that I'm learning, that I'm doing. And so the address of that is space, the number 4 peace, space4peace.blogspot.com, Organizing Notes. And then a really good website in the United States is Consortium News, where really good, progressive, honest journalists who either are retired from mainstream media or got fired from mainstream media for being honest. So they report Consortium News. That's very good. Consortiumnews.com, very good source of information. And so I am very close to it. So I went, and I've been there. I've been to Odessa in 2016 in Ukraine, and I went to the Donbass in 2019 in Ukraine.
Right.
And I've been to Russia a couple times. And so I have a feel for the people, and they're just like anywhere else. They're wonderful people. And they're being killed by the Nazis, and just because they're Russian ethnics. It's genocide. And the West just allows it to happen, and now is vigorously encouraging it to happen as well. The Greenville Post is good. The Moon of Alabama is just one of my favorites, a great source of information, the Moon of Alabama.
I was thinking of YouTube, like Redacted or the Jimmy Dore Show. There's some good stuff on YouTube, and there's lots of good information out there. Yeah. You just have to look a little further than your garbage on CNN and Fox News. It's almost unreadable.
You know, I in my town of Brunswick, there's somebody that at a recent peace potluck, if you can imagine such a thing, 3 weeks ago today, he walks in and says to me, you know, Bruce, if you'd stop talking about the Nazis, people would take you more seriously. Now, this guy is a member of Veterans for Peace. He's supposed to be a peace activist. He's supposed to be a progressive. He supposedly knows what's going on in the world. But he denies the fact that Nazis exist in Ukraine. I mean, that's elementary, third grade stuff, you know. Yeah. So anyway, this is what we're dealing with here.
I wanted to, we're kind of coming to the end, so I just wanted to thank you, Bruce, for all the hard work you're doing and never giving up on peace. And I encourage our listeners, get in touch with me if your faith community is doing something, if your community groups are doing something. I want to just get the message out there. So thanks again for the work you do, Bruce.
You too, Stuart. You're a really great, strong, clear voice in this world, and I thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Latin Waves. Latin Waves is an independently produced syndicated radio program made available for free to campus and community radios, and also to the world at latinwavesmedia.com. Please visit the website to hear previous shows, hear about upcoming events, and consider becoming a member for as little as $1 per month.